Hey, Richard. Welcome to the Future of Testing.
Hey Joe, how you doing?
Great, great. Really excited about your opening keynote, and the floor is yours. I already gave your intro, so we should be good to go.
Excellent. Let me give a quick share and we should be good. How are we
Per-
looking there, Joe?
Perfect. Looks excellent. Thank you.
All right. Everyone, firstly, thanks for Applitools for inviting me to talk at the Future of Testing. It's a topic that obviously I really enjoy talking about. So to be able to talk on this topic and also be a part of an event that's talking about the future is hugely appreciative. So I'm coming to you from my home in Manchester today, obviously because of the awesome lockdown. But let's get into the topic. So today I wanted to talk about what I call the whole picture. So there's a lot of approaches to automation, far more than anyone can ever talk about in a 30-minute talk. But I've come up with a few visual ways of encouraging people to dig a little deeper, explore your systems a little better and a little further. And that's what we're going to look at today, about how to do that and how pictures and visualizations can really drive conversations and discussions. But first, I called it Look at the Whole Picture. And then as I created it, I went, it's not really the whole picture because it's too big. So I've changed it to the bigger picture, but it doesn't really matter. I just had to get it off my head because it was bugging me. Right, so first picture. This is going to be relatively interactive. I like you to do stuff. So look at this picture. Firstly, some of you might know what this is, some of you might not. But when you look at this picture, what does it make you think? I'll give you like 5 seconds. Now, number one, I'm guessing you're not thinking that this is representing something simple, because there's a lot going on in that picture. And some of you might know what this is. This is actually a visualization of Monzo's microservices. So Monzo is a digital bank in the UK, become very popular. But yeah, they've gone 100% down the microservice approach, and this is what their system looks like. Now, that is complex. But now if you go to a Monzo app, you just see a nice little pretty screen that gives you your bank balance and allows you to send money to your friends. Now, under the hood, this is what's going on. It's complex. But a way of visualizing it immediately, if you joined that team, you would immediately be like, this is a complex project. Now take this glorious product. This glorious product. We have RESTful Booker platform, which is what we're going to look at today. You'll be looking at this website and you might think, well, there's not an awful lot going on there. But it is a relatively complex website. It might not look like a complex website, and under the hood it could be, but you don't know. But from a look at the UI, you're like, actually, it's simple. Contact us, form a few pictures and an email address. Probably not that important, not that complicated. And then you get sent this from one of your new teams that you've joined. Anyone not familiar with this? This is Swagger. So you've just joined the new team and they've sent you a Swagger document. Now, what's the first thing it makes you think? Me, as a tester, I'm like, all these fields, what can I do? How can I make things misbehave and break and change? But then my automation head is like, I could automate that. I could use that for something else. I could use this. I could use that. It gets me really thinking about my ideas. Whereas if someone just told me, there's a Room API, I'd be like, all right, that's cool. I probably imagine I can use that. But being sent something a bit more visual, a bit more descriptive, really gets me thinking about what I can do. So I mentioned RESTful Booker. So RESTful Booker is an open source automation playground created by myself and Mark Winteringham. It's full of APIs, full of practice code examples, and we're going to look at some of them today, but it's completely open source, and you can easily just search for RESTful Booker platform and you will find it. So you've just joined my team. Congratulations. You've all got a new job. You're all now part of Richard's test team, and we've been given RESTful Booker to test. So I present you with this login form, and I'm asking you, what would you test? Take 5 seconds to think about, all I've given you is this. What would you test? Now, this is the page for logging in. Now, for a start, I know for sure that some of you are like, oh, good login, bad login, no password, no username, mobile view, really long password, really long username. Sure. But what you don't know is how this works. You don't know how this website hangs together. You don't know anymore. So my tester hat is looking at it like that. I'm thinking, oh, scenarios. Where might things fall over? But my automation side of my brain is like, how does this website work? What does it do? How does it held together? What's the front end written in? Is there APIs? What is this talking to? Is it service client? How does it work? That's what I start to think. Now, neither of those patterns is wrong. Thinking of what to test is important. But when you come into the world of automation and where a lot of our industry is moving towards, you need to also think, I need to know how this works so I can test it efficiently. And more importantly, if some of you didn't look at this, from a point of me and Mark building this, we actually do care about login, but we care more about the footer, probably. We care that the version number's right. We care that it mentions who created it. But we always get drawn to various bits if we don't have conversations. Now, those conversations can be triggered by visualizations. So if you've never come across the 10 Ps of testability, I talk about it a lot. I think it's a fantastic visualization created by Rob Meany with the help of Ash Winter, I believe. And Rob actually got help from a designer to make this even look better, which is great, because like your effort and colors and stuff that you put into visualizations make a big difference. But the reason why I brought this up in relation to what I mentioned about you joining my test team is these are some of the common things that you need to think about in order to look at the whole picture, to look at the bigger picture. You need to look, you can't just look at a website and be like, I know what I'm going to automate, good login, bad login. I'm going to go straight down the UI, it's going to be wonderful. You can't do that. You have to look at the whole picture. And Rob's broken down 10 things that make that really easy to do. So people, who is on your team? Who's doing testing? Who's writing automation? Do you have product owners? How engaged are they? Does the business care about what you do? Or do they just want a report that they're not going to read? Who are the people in your team? And how much do they want to contribute to automation or testing? And what skills do they have? That's number one, like incredibly important. If you don't look after your people and delivering tools that makes it easier for them to do their job, you probably won't succeed. The philosophy kind of follows on from that. What is your team's approach to testing? Is it something we don't care about? Nah, who cares? You should care, because we're talking about the future of testing. But if you look at the bigger picture, the future of software is massive. The whole of our planet has just gone into a global lockdown, and some companies have thrived. Some companies have moved at such a pace that they're now actually not going back. So I hope there's a few people in the UK watching. In the UK, fish and chip shops, massive digress, but fish and chip shops, I saw this on the news yesterday. Fish and chip shops are traditionally a place you go in, you order, you're perfectly willing to wait 10, 15 minutes for your fish and chips because you know it's going to be fantastic. And one of our biggest fish and chips groups yesterday said that they're probably never going to go back to that model. So within 2 weeks, they pivoted and created click and collect for fish and chips, which sounds weird. Click and collect in my head is food shopping and DIY shops. But they created click and collect for fish and chips. And now they reckon that they will never go back to their traditional approach. It's been such a good shift for them that they're now going to carry on forward. And that's because the whole team was engaged. And then we're going to fly through the rest of these, but you've got your product, obviously, massively important. We focus on the product. We're trying to make a good product. We're trying to make a high quality product that actually users care about and people use, and hopefully in turn makes the business successful. Your processes, again, massively influences any approach to automation, let alone testing. If you're being given big bang releases, your jobs are immediately harder. If you're being given small releases, you can do certain things. You're saying for your project kind of ties in nicely. Massively important, we'll discuss this a bit more, but what is your problem? What are you trying to solve? So I said here, test this. Smartest question back to me is, well, what's your problem, Richard? What do you care about? What do you want to know more about? Problem framing, so important in everything that we do. Do you have a pipeline? Most people have a pipeline these days, but I can guarantee you there will also be plenty of projects that don't. But what is your pipeline? Can you hook into it with the tools that you're considering using? If you can't, why would you go ahead and build a massive framework if you can't hook it into a pipeline? it's kind of a given that most things have been written by somebody, but you still should check. Productivity, how fast are you at working? How quick and efficient are you? Any production issues make a big impact on your actual approach to testing, and especially automation, because some things are broken, but the business is happy to accept that. And then also, how proactive is your team? You're all watching an online conference right now, so clearly, I would say you're all pretty proactive. You're eager to learn, but these things make a big difference to the whole picture. You need to understand all this. For anything you try and do in testing and automation, changes you try and make, all can be covered in this thing. So you look at the whole picture, and that will help you guide and choose a sensible approach to automation, which is exactly what we're going to look at now. So I showed you a login screen, and I'm going to look at a traditional approach to that login screen. And then we're going to look, if we slightly look at the bigger picture, what other types of testing could we do? And do we have the skills to do that? And the answer is, you all do. Just to jump ahead, every single one of you has the skills, and we will be able to push ahead with that. Now, before we do that, we all need to take a moment. I'm going to try and do some live, not coding, because that's too far for me. I'm going to run some things that work, some automated checks that work. So all take a moment just to hope that this works. Pray to the demo gods, fingers crossed. All right, so we're going to switch to, actually, we're not even going to be able to do that because I've messed up my screen sharing, boo-hoo. One sec. So let's find Zoom. Oh, it won't let me change it. Oh, well, never mind. Oh, here we go. Share screen, change application. So let me just share my whole screen. That will be so much easier. There we go. All right. So, sorry, I just gave Joe a mild heart attack there. It's all right, Joe. We're all good. Right. So we switched to IntelliJ. I've got a traditional UI test here, UI check. Basically, when you show people a login form in our class that we teach automation and testing, the first thing we see people automate is a successful login. Happens all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. It is a solid attempt, but it's got a lot of overhanging questions. But let's just run this to see if we are in a good place. So this is just Selenium, nothing fancy. I've called it a smoke test. If any of you know why it's called a smoke test? I only learned this recently. Apparently it started with plumbers who used to set fire to one end of pipes and hope that no smoke came out of the pipes, and that would be considered a smoke test. I thought that's kind of cool. And then the electricians stole the idea, because obviously if your electrics are on fire, that's probably not a good place to be. And that name kind of progressed into the world of software. But anyway, we have a smoke test. We're just simply going to fill in the username, password, and click login. That should take us to what we know is the room listing page, because I wrote the app, and then we simply check that the form exists. If we jump into that, basically form is displayed. Absolutely pretty terrible approach to testing, but very, very common. And I will explain why this is terrible. I'm not just being flippant. But let's see if it runs. See if everything's good. See if the demo gods are happy. So yeah, we open Chrome, we log in, boom, job done. Happy days. All right, it's running twice for some reason. Nobody knows why. So it's running 3 times, even better. All right, I think I've run all of them instead of just the one I wanted. Yeah, I did. Never mind. Right, we'll stop that. So that's a very traditional approach. People do something, we check we're on the right page. Very, very common. You'll see a lot of this. And then very simply checking that some element is on the screen. And is that good enough? Personally, I don't think so anymore. So let's have a look at what happened in our system when we did this. So this is the picture visualization technique that I'm really trying to encourage you all to adopt today. So the first thing I've done down the left here is I've broken down the system into layers. So you call them layers. I also call them seams. The reason why, for me, layers are things that sit on top of each other. So they have a relationship, but the relationship is simply that they're on top of each other. Whereas if you think of a seam and you think of something like a t-shirt, these two have a relationship, but they've been entwined. They've been sewn together. They have something about it. They know something about the other, that means that they have a relationship. So I call them scenes because for me, they're connected in some way. And that's very important when we look through the rest of this visualization. So really simple, RESTful Booker has a UI. You've all seen it. It has some JavaScript under the hood. So I'll jump ahead and give you some insight. It's written in React. So React is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this application. We have some APIs, and then we have what we call the service layer, the actual guts of the application are hosted on our server. There is no DB on this application. Me and Mark are terrible developers, and we couldn't be bothered creating a DB because when you try and install stuff for training, the complexity of a DB is just more noise. So this DB is purely in memory, so it doesn't matter in this example. But this is the first thing I encourage every person I coach on automation to do. What does your system look like? Not the screen, not the UI, the whole system. What layers exist? Do you have third parties? Do you have bus things like RabbitMQ shifting things around? Do you have a gazillion databases? What does it look like? Because it's very hard to automate something when you don't understand all the things that can cause it to fail or cause the behavior to change or just interfere with your checks. When they fail and it's like, well, I'll run it again and it passes. You need to, that little snippet just makes me want to know why. And the only way I can know why is if I know everything that's going on down the system. So that's what we have here with RESTful Booker Platform. So we are then going to, hey, the joys of this stuff, Joe. Let's try again. There we go. No, it doesn't want to work. We'll just do this. All right. So the first thing we need to think about is, who is the actor? So Mr. Elba, incredible actor, but something's piqued his curiosity. He spotted something that's interesting to him. He has an interest in something. So the first thing we have to do in any of our visual task analysis is, who is our actor? So if we jump back to our flow, we have to think about who is the actor. So what we're doing here, just to be clear, is visual task analysis is a visual way of displaying task analysis. Task analysis was something introduced to me by Rob Sabarin, and it's basically breaking things down into small chunks. So a common way that people write about this and teach this is they ask you to make a cup of tea. And being very British, I saw a video recently on social that was horrific. Someone made tea by putting hot water in a cup and then putting milk in it and then putting tea in it. And it was American. I'm sorry, Joe. I know you don't all, you don't all make tea that way. But it wasn't American. And yeah, don't make tea that way. But usually what you ask people is they say, I get a cup, I turn I fill the kettle up, I turn it on, I do the tea bag. But you can get really annoying. You'd be that person like, oh, right, what hand do you put the kettle on with? How forceful are you with the button on the kettle? How much pressure in the water? You can get really granular. But the point here is we need to get granular with our automation to shift our way into the future of doing different focused automation. So we have a UI. We're going to quickly fill all this in. Cool. So this is what happens when you click login on RESTful Booker Platform. I've gathered this information by looking at my testability, and then more importantly, by giving Mark a really hard time, asking him how it works. But developers are fantastic. The people who develop your product, they know how it works. They might not know in every little piece, but they can walk you through it. So we click login. That triggers React. React builds the login form, which you all saw before. We then interact with the login. We click send. That sends it to the auth API. The auth API goes, ooh, you've sent me some stuff. Is it JSON? Oh my God, it parses. It's JSON. I love JSON. And then it goes, all right, fine, I'm going to pass this over to my unit friend. My friend goes, oh yeah, you're giving me a Java object now. Very nice. It looks good to me. I'll give you a token. And then the API is back in the game. It's like, oh, you've got me to do something for you. Okay, I'll send this up to React. No worries. Sends it to React. React goes, oh, you're giving me something to do, but React's a bit cool, React's like, yeah, whatever. I'll do it for you, but I'm not really interested in it, but I'll do it. So React gets the token, sets it, and then React then realizes there's a token there, decides that you're authenticated, and pushes you to the room page. So now I'm going to go back to what I believed a lot of you would have said, which is successful login. What did you mean? When you said successful login, what did you mean? Did you mean that as a user, as the actor, I can see a form and I can fill it in. Did you mean that I can see a form that looks nice, nicely laid out, nicely form labels? It's got placeholder text. There's a button that's big enough for me to acknowledge and see. Or did you mean that when I click submit, something happens? Did you mean that if I put correct credentials in, I get let into the system? Did you mean that there isn't a big picture of Joe in the left-hand corner of the login form? What did you mean when you looked at that login form and you said, do a successful login? Because that's really important. Because when you do a successful login, this is what happens. Every single dot on this model could cause your UI script to fall over. And that's concerning for me. How many of you have ever had your UI scripts fall over and the problem has got absolutely nothing to do with the UI? 90% of the time. Because you're at the top of the tree, you're at the top of the stack, and underneath a billion things happen. And RESTful Booker is one of the most simple applications around. Now imagine having something really big. Imagine something like Facebook. Actually, no, I hate Facebook. Don't talk about Facebook. Imagine it's like a good website, like testguilds.com, right? Imagine there, when you log in, loads of stuff happens. So what's going on in that system can massively impact your UI scripts. And a lot of the time, it isn't the UI that's failed. And then what happens is it takes you time to find out the problem. You dig deep into it, you rerun it, you read log files, you talk to developers. It takes time. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down into small scenarios. So my first risk is actually I care that the form's nice. So I really care about my brand. So if I switch to Chrome, I care that this is nice. I care that it laid out nice. It isn't broken. There's no horrible CSS that's messing my screen up. It's clean. It looks good. And I care about that because I care about my brand. I care about how I'm perceived to customers. Every single one of you as testers or software developers or engineers, when you land on a website that looks terrible, you immediately go, I don't want to use this website. We don't want that. So here I'm interested that it looks good. And to make sure it looks good, there's lots of tools around, obviously, but I'm a long-term engagement with Appy Tools, so I prefer to use Appy Tools. So here, my only concern is, does the page look good? So what I have to do is go and find tools that allow me to do things to make sure I can check that the website looks good. So here I've got a very simple visual test. We are just going to go to the login page, take a screenshot, send it to Appy Tools. They do their magic, and they'll tell me if my image is good or bad. So that's running now. We should hopefully see it fire up. Excuse me. And of course it doesn't fire up because, demo gods and all that. And it won't fire up because I broke the website. So we just stop that. Try again. So the reason that failed, just if anyone's curious about how this is set up, some of our checks are designed to teach state. So in this instance, it starts the application itself, whereas some of our other scenarios, the application has to be running from the beginning. But to be honest, don't think it's going to work anyway for some reason. Let's have a quick look. See, this is the fun of it. It worked brilliantly, like 25 minutes ago. We'll try it once more. If no joy, we'll just go and look at the result. But either way, while that's thinking about it, it's 3 lines of code. So one of the things I want to point out, it's really simple. It starts Appy Tools, goes to the web page, takes a screenshot, and sends it to them. They compare it, and we have a compare anyway if this doesn't want to play nice. But it seems to be thinking about playing nice this time. Not going to wait for that. If it plays nice, it plays nice. But what happens is we end up with this inside Appy Tools. We end up with 2 images side by side. And now I know without absolute doubt that this website looks correct. I can see it. It's perfectly correct. I've decided it's correct. I've set the baseline. Appy Tools is telling me it's correct. I now know that my risk of does the website look nice is confirmed, which is fantastic because that's really important to me as part of my business. While this scenario is failing, who knows? That's why we pray to the demo gods, and you clearly didn't pray hard enough for me. So we're going to quickly jump back to PowerPoint. So there you go. I've mitigated a single risk, but importantly, I've only gone down 2 layers because I'm only concerned about those layers of my system. I don't care about the rest of the system. Second scenario here is that the auth API has changed. So I told you I'm hitting an API. My concern here is, well, what if the API changes and no one's told the front end that the API doesn't exist anymore? Unlikely to happen, but a lot of people version control their APIs. So it's really important to make sure that's the case. So what we've done here is we've written something using React Testing Library. If you're not familiar with React Testing Library, it's written by Kent Dodds. It's very, very well-maintained product, well-maintained open source library as well. But here, we've started a mock for the auth API. And all we're doing, within React Testing Library, we're creating a virtual DOM. We are firing some events, which is filling in the form. And we're seeing if our mock gets hit. So we're not calling the real system because I don't care about the real system. I care that React is calling the right thing. So we can run this. Should learn the keyboard shortcuts for the terminal, make my life easier. Never mind. Cool. So we're just going to run npm test login, and that uses Jest under the hood. And we should hopefully, there we go. So as I said, all that did was tell me if the login API changes. So I've got another layer down. I'm quite happy with my protection there. So I've mitigated one smaller risk. The next step, so I mentioned the API loves getting JSON, but what if the API doesn't handle it correctly? So I added admin password, but the API, for some reason, doesn't like that. I don't want to know that via the UI. That's going to be quite hard for me to debug via the UI. So I can do some stuff with an API library. So we keep losing my mouse, really annoying me. There we go. So with the in this instance, we're using Rest Assured because I've done most of this in Java. But really simply, we're creating some body, some JSON, sending it to an API, and telling us whether we get a token back. So it's telling me that my API is behaving as I would want it to. Now, I absolutely know that I don't want the system running for this one. So we will just quickly turn that off. So if I run this, it's going to start my system, trigger an API call, and tell me if my API is behaving as I would hope it to. And fingers crossed, it should do. But as I said, we're reducing our scope, we're reducing our focus, we're reducing our risk. We're looking at smaller parts of our system independently. So again, it's a bit small down here, but you can see that passed. No need for a UI, none of that stuff. Really tuned, nicely focused in on the API. And then finally, well, what if the system doesn't generate a token? So as I showed you on the very first model, the token goes all the way to the top. And what if there is no token? That's going to fail. So we can create really quick, simple unit test here that just creates a token and checks that it's all valid, right? And look at that, it literally takes 28 milliseconds to run. But that tells us that we have a valid token. So we've gone down a system from a very simple approach of test login to be able to look at 3, 4 very small targeted checks that run independently of each other. But what would happen now is if any part of this failed, you would be told very quickly which parts failed. And that's really important going forward because a lot of people talk about the speed of automation, and automation is quick. It's usually very, very quick. But what isn't quick is debugging stuff on the wrong layer. So if you want to do some visual testing, you need to do your best, ideally, to not see the whole system because you just want to test the visual layer. You're interested in that. If you only care that the API works, you want to go straight to the API. And the reason being, as I said, speed of execution is usually quicker. That's kind of not true these days. The tools are really improving, like, year on year. But debug time is significantly quicker. So yeah, we took a very simple login form, broke it down, and created lots of different checks based on risk. And we displayed it in a visual approach. So if you can create models like this, you can critique them, you start to see scenarios that plan out. So I'm going to wrap up with my challenge to you for the future of testing. What I want you to do is go back to every single automated check in your code base right now, one by one, make a really important point about it. And is the risk clear to you? Have a look at it. What are you actually trying to mitigate? And are you doing it on the right layer? Do you have a full picture of how your system looks? If you don't, get it, reassess the risk of the check. Is the intent clear? Does it make it very clear what it's trying to do? When you have your login scenario, is it that they can log in? Or is it that they can log in and it's pretty and it looks nice and it's fast and it's efficient? What was your concern? Because also, other people are going to pick up your scripts, and that's crucial. Secondly, please expand your toolbox. I get a lot of emails from automation engineers that I only know Selenium, or I only know this tool or that tool. There was a point in your life that you didn't know Selenium. There was a point in your life when you didn't know how to write code or whatever, use any tool, do anything. You can learn any tool and they're all the same. They all work the same way. Programming languages tend to be the same. Please expand your toolboxes. Sign up for demos. Sign up for an Appitools account. Give it a go. Even if you've got no intent of using it, next time your brain thinks of doing something on the UI, this will help you because you're going to have awareness of a tool. So please practice as many tools as you can. Take as many pictures as you can. Draw as many pictures as you can. Be visual with your approach to testing. Because one thing that I know is becoming more true than ever, the future of testing is visual. The future of testing, seriously, is visual. Not just in case of using tools to compare screenshots, but drawing models, complexity, displaying complexity, having conversations about complexity. Visualizations trigger conversations. So please get visual. And that's that. So that was a quick look at VTAs. If you want to know more about me, you can find me on all these various websites, but I'm curious to talk to Joe. So, Joe.
Awesome, Richard. If you could just put your camera, stop sharing and put your camera back on, that'd be great. I really love this approach of visual, this graph that you have, because I really think it's going to help a lot of testers. I could chalk your ear off, but I just want to get to the questions from the audience because it's not about me. So let's just jump into the first questions we have here. First one's from Anand. He wants to know, what's the definition of smoke test, or your definition of smoke test?
Like I said about the analogy of where it came from, for me, like, is it literally on fire? I think most systems should have like less than 5 ideally, but less than 10 for sure smoke tests. It's literally, is the system hanging together in its loose form as possible? Are the APIs up? Is the UI up? Is the DB up? Can they talk? Even, I don't care what they're talking. They could be talking absolute gibberish. But as long as they're connected, that tells me that my system is roughly in a place that's appealing to me. And so, yeah, really low touch, do things talk to each other.
Perfect. All right, next question. They want to know, the flowchart is awesome, but it seems to be an analytical way, which is similar to a test case. How would you differentiate it to a test case?
First part of that question, Joe?
The flowchart is awesome, but it seems to be an analytical way, which is similar to a test case.
So test cases tell you what to test. To say, you should test this and test that. And this should be the expected result. That is not what I'm trying to do with the visualization. I'm trying to encourage you to actually test, to discover information, which will then infer your decisions around automation. So I'm asking you to find out how your system behaves. Not necessarily to test each bit, just to know the knowledge. When you do some of these, and I've done plenty of them, there's bits of it that you're like, well, I just don't care. It's about discovery. It's about understanding which bits interact with which bits, because if they interact, it can probably cause them to misbehave. If you're really serious about automation, state is crucial. So if you don't know what's going on under the bit you want to test, you can't control the state. So controllability is crucial. So yeah, they're not meant to be test cases. Test cases are instructions for someone to follow. This is discovery activity. This is learning. This is a way of visualizing your learning and also sharing it. There was I forgot her name, Carol, I can't remember her surname, Carol, it's gone, Carol Brand. She used this from one of our trainings, and all the developers started arguing. It was great. They were like, no, the system doesn't work that way. It works this way. It's like, didn't you write this? You wrote this, didn't you, Sarah? It's just like, yeah, I did, but it doesn't work that way. And they started discovering and realized that people didn't know how this system worked. So yeah, not the same thing.
Absolutely. All right, Richard, we have a question from AJ. You did mention tools, and so here's kind of like that. Which tool can be used to draw the layers like yours?
To draw them like on a... So yeah, well, we've done this in the past, and actually we're doing our first online instance of this training course, and we're going to try use draw.io. I think it recently rebranded itself as diagrams.net or something. But yeah, draw.io is the best approach that I found to doing it. And there's also some good mapping tools out there in the Wardley map space. There's a few tools in that. But really, I prefer to do them by hand. These things don't live for long. So one thing as well, I do this when I join new projects, and I encourage everyone to do it from the off. But after this, I tend to do a lot of it in my head. But if I do want to talk to other people about the system, grab a pen, grab a whiteboard, because you're not going to get it right. So when you go into a tool, it slows you down. So grab a pen, grab a whiteboard, give it a go.
Great. So next question. This is awesome. Thank you, everyone, for asking your questions. It makes this fun. All right. So Richard, next one is, it seems to be a bit time-consuming for just finding out how or what to test. I really do like this approach, but what would you do? Oh, would you do it for every feature? I believe that it's a very good investment for our quality, but how often do you do it? Do you do it for every feature? Things like that.
As I said, I tend to do them when I join projects. I tend to encourage. When I do bring them back up again, or when I do new ones, is when I don't understand. So it's a trigger for me. If I can't draw it in my head, I don't understand. So therefore, I need to then, in order for me personally to work, I need to get visual. So I would try and draw it. I would have a big gaping hole in the middle of it, and I would go to the team and say, help me fill in this void. The answer is yes, it is time consuming. But part of the bigger picture of automation is creation of code. So creation of code, creation of state, debugging of failed scenarios, all that takes time too. And people often overlook that stuff. I've spent 3 hours debugging the UI script in the past, to turn out it was something completely ridiculous. Imagine if I'd spent just half of that time learning more about the system before I went down that route. I would have a better thing. So yeah, time's fluid. Yes, you've lost a bit up front, but you're probably going to gain it at some point. It's a trade-off.
Right, Richard, so Anand wants to know, is the React testing library a type of framework like Selenium and Cypress?
Not really, no. So it's completely under the hood. It's like a virtual DOM. So you don't start a browser. So it's not designed to be finding out whether your product works in a browser. It's mainly designed for unit testing React. So its focus is being able to trigger React without the need of a browser. So you can fire events, you can check statuses, you can see what's been updated, what's not. But one thing that's crucial is that what really you're trying to get this across to automation engineers, it behaves the same way. So it's different syntax, but I want to poke my website in some way. I want to poke my code in some way. Selenium or Cypress allows me to poke by clicking buttons on a website that I'm comfortable with. I'm used to it as a tester or as a user of the world of software. But these tools allow me to poke React in a certain way. API tools allow me to poke APIs in a certain way. Like that's the syntax is almost identical. Like I want to do something, I want to check something. But yeah, not the same as you, not browser based basically.
Cool. Okay, next question. They want to know, the JS and SVC layers seem more like unit tests. Do you think testers should be writing unit tests rather than developers?
It's a big question. This is why I tried to focus on the testability a little bit. I believe that products and teams need to test in the right place. I personally don't care who makes it. There's preferences, there's more efficient approaches. While you're writing unit level code, yes, it's probably easier for that person to write, a unit test at the same time. If they're following something like TDD, it's more about design, but you end up with a suite of unit tests that, then can continue to be there. So I don't personally advocate for it, but what I am completely against is doing things on layers higher up just because that's where you're meant to be. It's absolutely waste of your time to write something on an API or a UI that you know should be done at a unit test. Ask to do it yourself. If you don't have the skills, pair with the developer, plea your arguments to whoever you need to in your team, but to say, look, if we do this on this layer, we run these risks, it's going to take this much longer to execute. I've identified via my VTAs that we should mitigate this risk here. I want to go and pair with Jane, and Jane is going to help me create this unit test. So do whatever. It's all about context, but if you have the skill, do it. If you don't have the skill, get someone else to help. But if you know it's the right thing to do it. Just find a way to do it.
Okay, Richard, last question. Someone wants to know, are these examples available on GitHub?
Yeah, so if you, I can give you the link as well, Joe, but to send out maybe, or to Appy Tools. But yeah, if you find the RESTful Booker platform GitHub repo, the code base is absolutely full of various different tools. They're all commented as well as they can be. They probably need maintaining a little bit. But yeah, there's lots of different examples in there. The whole product's deployable locally. There's even Docker tutorials in there. There's CI tutorials. There's, I think, 10 different test frameworks. There's the Appy Tools examples in there as well. So yeah, it's all open source.
Awesome. Richard, thank you so much. That's actually the last question. And I really appreciate you. I love this concept of automation and testing. And I think this keynote puts it in a whole new level. I just love this framework. I think it's another framework more folks should be embracing. So thank you for all you do for the community and for this. But any parting words of wisdom, Richard, before we go?
Expand your tool set. That is the most important thing. Keep learning new tools, experiment with new tools, and keep adapting and changing and pushing yourself forward as an awesome automation engineer, software engineer, tester, whatever your job title is. Just keep pushing.
Keep pushing and keep it visual. Awesome. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers, Joe. Bye.